of their policies and other information to the citizens so that the citizens get glued to whatever thing the politicians are saying, whether it is true or not true, because of how they continuously use the media to give them that information. The citizen gets attached to that information.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. So all of you have demonstrated some level of understanding of the theory or the concept of mediatization. And Najat, you want to say something?
Oh, I just wanted to add that mediatization in it, like how I understand it, is how it has become embedded in the process of our political communications that
Fantastic.
we can't do anything without it. So we've become mediatized.
Yeah.
So it's the
Although,
process of it being the mediatization.
okay. Although majority of the greater part of your submission was karaoke, we still got the understanding of what you meant. So yes, I think Najat is much more closer. We're looking at the predominant influence of media in political communication. Of course, most of you had actually alluded to what we call mediation, which is the the media serving as the channel or the medium of communication or the interlocutor in the engagement between political actors and the people, which is more mediation. Now, in mediatization, when we talk about the concept of mediatization, we're talking about the overliness of media's influence in political communication. In other words, we're talking about the orientation, the media orientation of political communication. And that is what Najat actually talked about. We're talking about the idea that political communication, so to speak, had been hijacked, or political communication is very well embellished by the processes of the media. And the theory of mediatization actually says that it is the understanding that in political communication of recent times, it is the media that actually shapes and frames the communication, the behavior of the parties involved in the communication, as well as the entire environment or the society that the communication or the political communication actually pertains. All right. And so the theory of mediatization goes beyond the media only becoming a link of transmission. That in itself is not mediatization, but mediation. Because obviously, and I'm sure Dominic might have actually highlighted that in the early days of democracy or political engagement, political actors, both the political officials and of course the public, had some closeness, or had a what do you call face-to-face or one-to-one contact. So politicians would do the public engagement. They will go to the doorsteps of the people. They will have a conversation with them. As the society grows and becomes bigger, it became almost impossible for you to say that you're going to have one-on-one with your constituent. And so the prominence of mass media as we know it substituted the mediation process. So the mediation then was obviously using the language is a mediation, using letters is a mediation, etc. But we're talking about the introduction of mass media, the introduction of institutional media into the engagement of political class and the citizenry. That is what we're talking about. And the onward growth and onward power that media exercises on that particular engagement is what we're talking about mediation, what do you call mediatization. So we're saying that the phenomenon of political communication is very much a media production, is very much media influence. So media shapes and frames the behavioral, the content, the environmental, circumstances around political communication. And that's the point that we're actually talking about. Peter, you want to say something? Peter, your hand is up.
Sorry, I think it's my this.
Okay, thank you. So we're saying that mediatization is a theory which argues that it is the media which shapes and frames the processes and the discourse of political communication, as well as the society in which that communication takes place. All right. Now, let's take, for example, some of the key words here: shapes and frames. All right. How does the media shapes and frames, political communication or political discourse? Yeah. Through what or which part of the media systems do we say is shaping and frames? Yeah. Are you guys journalism or PR or both?
PR.
PR.
Journalism.
Okay, so both. Now, so you've done the processes of news, all right, etc. Now, what function or which function of journalism or which principle of journalism could you use to say that that explains the way media shapes and frames, discourse? Okay, so Najat. Najat, you're on mute, so you can unmute yourself.
Please say, I remember priming.
Yeah?
I've forgotten one. Priming.
Okay. Yeah, priming. Yes. Yeah. What does priming mean?
So I've forgotten, but I just remember that it's part of the shaping and the framing of acts of the media.
So
it's just I've forgotten the explanation.
When we talk about priming, what does that mean? When we talk about priming, the media primes, the news. What does that mean? So we're talking about the processes that make media actually makes certain issues prominent. All right. So when we say media primes, it means that there are so many issues in the society, isn't it? There are so many stories in the societies or problems in the societies. However, the media chooses which one they want to make important or which one they want to put in the eyes or in the public domain, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, so media can decide to prime crime, or can decide to prime corruption, or can decide to prime health issues. And so we're saying that there are so many issues in the system, that people have. Why is it that some are not getting the attention? For example, people of, activism, what do you call, activities, or people who actually engage in activism would actually tell you that the media primes, for example, sex, for example, or they can talk about feminism and masculinity, issues, and says when it comes to, a feminist agenda, the media doesn't prime that, all right, but they prime other things. Somebody would actually say that the media primes politics, other than health news, for example, all right. So when we talk about priming, we're talking about how media actually makes salience or makes importance some issues over other issues. And that is how media shapes political discourse. So why is it that for a very long time we'll be talking politics, but we're not talking issues of culture, issues of health, issues of why? Because the media tend to over concentrate, i.e., priming some of these issues. Peter.
So it has to do with the how the issues, how media prioritize certain issues in our communities, what they deem important, not really what the citizens deem important, but rather the media seems this issue is important. Excellent. Not what the citizens feel.
Excellent. And that's what we call priming. And that means that the media is shaping public discourse, all right, by their attitude or by their activities of priming. It means the media is shaping, public discourse. The media is dictating what we must talk about, all right, and what would not see the light of day. And that's what we're talking about. Okay, great point. Now, when we talk about the communication processes, all right, what do we mean by communication processes? Remember, we're looking at mediatization, the idea that media overly influences in a political communication. And we're looking at how the media does that. Now, when we talk about processes of communication, what are we talking about? Processes of communication. Peter.
Yeah, processes of communication has to do with the stages.
Yeah.
The channels.
Sir.
Yes. Peter is on the floor.
Yeah, sir. So it has to do with the stages or the channels that information passes through before reaching the final receiver.
Okay. So who else? Who was calling me? Who else? Okay. Now, so just as Peter said, if you take the common processes of communication, we have the sender, we have encoding, yeah, and we have the receiver, the decoding, we have the receiver, and then we have noise, isn't it? That cycle of the communication theory. So when we talk about the processes of communication, we mean one, the selection or the the parties involved in the communication. So the selection of who is actually speaking, yeah. What are they saying? Through which channel are they saying that? What noises are actually, feeding into the communication? How is the respondent or how is the audience disseminating that information? And how is the audience giving a feedback into the loop? All right. That's the process of communication we're talking about. Now, let me say that those of you who have access to quality internet and you would want to put your camera on, you can do that so that at least the class is much more interactive. All right. Those who, by putting your camera on, you may have interruptions, you can, and then of course, because of bundle cost, you can actually put it off. But those who can actually put it on, it's okay, so that we can have interactivity. Now, so we're saying that that process of communication is actually mediatized because when it comes to news gathering, all right, it is the media that determines whom they go to say what, and gets through the process. It's the media that determines what language they use to write or to encode the news, isn't it? So the word choices that actually goes into the news writing, it is not the choices of someone, it's the choices of the news production team. They decide the kind of words they use to describe an activity or an event or a discourse, all right? Now, they decide the channel through which they would actually, communicate. So it's either in the morning news or in the afternoon news or in the evening or, mid-morning. They are decisions of the media, all right? And then, of course, during that dissemination process, there's noise, introduction of adverts in the adverts during news times or during certain broadcasts. If it's print, maybe just by the editorial, there's an advertisement of a product that can disrupt the reader's attention. All these things are the making of the media, isn't it? Are you following? Are you following the conversation?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we're saying that the processes of communication or political discourse and the discourse itself are actually influenced by the media and the media's activities, all right? But that is not enough. We're also saying that the society within which that communication is taking place is also being shaped by the media, all right? Now, it means that even our own understanding or our own effort to understand what is going on has been influenced by the practices of the media. Do you get it? Our perspectives on what is going on has been influenced by the media. So if we have to actually throw in an example, who can tell me in the last few days something that they know about the public or something that they know is going on in the public that has not been influenced by media reporting? Who can tell me? Anything that you know in the last 1 week that you think there's no media influence in it?
Sir, please, that was during the COVID when Akufo-Addo came to speak. I think the media hasn't really said anything about it, which was the COVID that all clubs should be closed and other things.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Foster?
Please, I think it's about the court case.
Yeah?
The court case. The
Yeah.
court case.
Yeah, let's listen to you. Explain.
Well, it is the court case in the sense that it has a bigger attention. So therefore, it is a national issue at which no media or medium can manipulate. And in a sense, the court determines whether the media should cover it or not. That is my understanding.
So you think that the ongoing court case has no mediatization in it?
Well, I think the media doesn't have much influence in terms to determine what to do or not. It is determined by the court. That is my understanding.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, so I also think one of the issues that has not been given much attention is the proposal the MP sent to Parliament for the government to absorb this year's school fees of tertiary students. I think much attention hasn't been given to it. The media has not gone to it, why that decision and why that thing will benefit the Ghanaians as a whole. And even the petition was rejected and they voted against it. And yes, so we've not heard much about it and why they voted against it. And I think it's one of the issues that I think it's key to Ghanaians, but in the media has not given much attention to it.
Okay, thank you. Beko. Eric Beko.
Bequeen.
Bequeen, okay, sorry.
Yes, please.
Are you the one who just spoke?
Yes, please, I'm
okay.
the one.
Okay, so if you can put your hands down. Now,
right.
30521, you have to change your name.
Yes, so I think
no, change it and come back. I told you to change it.
Okay.
You have to change the device name. Yeah, so say it. Okay. Say what you want to say, but change it. Yeah, I'm listening to you.
Okay, yeah. It's about the COVID issue where numbers are rising and people are not talking about it in all the radio stations, which concerns everybody. Okay. But it's you hardly hear people talk about it in all the radio stations or television stations. Only few.
Okay, thank you. I think, okay, Peter, one last, and then we'll go ahead.
I also think it has to do with president directive that if you are not wearing nose masks, they will arrest you. I think the publication is not going as I think it should be.
All right, thank you. Let me say that it sounds like there's a misunderstanding of what mediatization is in your perspective that you have actually given out. That is not what we mean by mediatization. We're talking about the idea that communication, political communication, had become media oriented, had become a production of the media, as opposed to, what it is. And that's what we're talking about. Don't conflate it with media coverage on that. No, we're saying that mediatization is a theory which argues that the media shapes and frames the processes and discourses of political communication, as well as the society in which that communication takes place. It means that, for want of a better word, the media has actually hijacked communication and having it their own twist, all right, on the political communication. Jennifer.
Sir, please, if I understand correctly, if I understand the definition for mediatization correctly, then if the media shapes and frames for the general public, then it means they have a critical role to play. As my colleagues said,
No one has actually talked about critical role or no critical role, or importance or no importance. That's not what we're discussing.
Yeah,
we're not putting judgment on to what extent, has the media been good or not, or has been critical to public discourse or not. But you can go ahead and complete.
I wanted to raise the point. Okay. They were saying, you said we are mistaking mediation
with mediatization.
Yes. In my thoughts, I'm thinking what my colleagues are saying, particularly on the COVID cases, that if the media is actually hitting the point on what the president said, then we would be making headway.
Yeah, but that's not what is on discussion. We're not actually saying that the media should not or is doing little or doing more on what the president said. We're actually saying that to what extent is media reflecting actually what the president is saying, or not actually what the president is saying. There are two different things. Okay, Mary.
Yes, so can we say that mediatization is when the media decide on which topic to be sent to the public, or the type of information that the public
Exactly, that's what we're talking about. So, for example, if the president gives a speech, all right, 5-minute speech, the president has spoken so many things, all right, in 5 minutes, and the media decides that they want to take only the first 2 minutes of the president's speech, what happens to the remaining 3 minutes? All right, that does not see the light of day. So only the 2 minutes of the president's speech is what the media is hammering on. That is what we are talking about, mediatization. We are talking about the overliness of the media's influence on political communication. Do you get the point I'm making? Irene?
Yes.
Yeah, you want to say something?
Yes, please. I want to ask that in this regard, the media sets the agenda, right?
Yeah. So and that's what we're talking about, the many processes that the media uses, all right, the many processes that the media uses to influence the political discourse or public discourse is what we're talking about. And that includes agenda setting, that includes framing, priming, as someone actually highlighted. So we're not talking about the media giving more coverage or less coverage about the issue, but we are talking about to what extent is media influencing the issues from their perspective, not from the perspectives of the other parties involved, yeah, but from the media's perspective, how the media want the public to actually see it, or how they want to communicate the information. That's the point that we're talking about. Do you appreciate what we're discussing?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So that's the point that we're making. We're not saying that mediatization means whether media is giving more or less coverage. We're saying that how is the media embellishing or dictating, political communication. All right, how media is dictating political communication from the production to consumption of media and the entire environment around political communication. That's what we're talking about. B.
Sir, please, I want to know something. I beg. Does it have a relationship with gatekeeping?
Everything that actually explains how the media shapes and frames public discourse. So that includes gatekeeping.
Gatekeeping. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Right? Yes. Any other?
Okay, sir. Sir.
Yeah, go ahead, Peter.
So back to the question you asked.
Yeah.
If we are to rephrase it in a simple way, you are just asking us to give you news about the past week that the media has not really placed emphasis on. Or has not prioritized. We should give you news, maybe the past week, something that has happened. Yeah. That the media is not really placing an emphasis on.
Exactly.
That's the question.
Yeah, hasn't influenced it. That's what I was asking. Okay. Yeah. But anyway, let's move on.
Okay.
Let's move on because we don't have enough time. So that's the point we're making. We're saying that in mediatization, there is that impact or that influence on what we know. And if you take the COVID reporting, for example, all right, I'm sure that if we ask 3 or 4 people, they will give you what they know about COVID, and they're likely to be different. All right, you're likely to see variations of what people say about what they know about COVID. All right, and that in itself tells you about how that influences them, because in most cases, people are actually reflecting what they actually hear or they get to know from the media perspective. Jennifer, is your hand up? Or is
no, sir.
Okay. Najat.
Hello, sir.
Hello.
Yeah, we're
listening. Hello, sir.
We're listening.
So, I wanted to give an example of how the media focuses on a particular subject to give it to the citizen. I want to use the recent funeral of the late GIJ Rawlings.
Yeah.
The Ghanaians didn't know he had illegitimate children, but because when he died and they came up, it was the media coverage that made everyone. So the media can decide it won't cover those stories, and nobody would know that the late GIJ Rawlings had children elsewhere. So I think that's one of the examples of the way how the media chooses what to report.
Okay, thanks very much for that example. Now, so let's drill down a little bit into that particular example. Now, from your perspective, all right, do you think that that particular issue of whether the former president has children or not, is the creation of the media?
Whether the former president had children or not is the creation of the media.
Do you think it's the creation of the media or it's a reality?
Oh, I think it's a reality.
Is it a general question?
It's a reality.
Yeah, it's a general question I'm asking you guys. So you think it's a reality?
It's a reality.
It's a reality, but it's coming to our attention as the creation of the media.
Yeah, so Foster is online.
Okay, Foster.
Can I speak? Yes, please. It is a reality.
Okay, so give me, rationale behind your thinking that is a reality.
It is a reality that the victims came to one way or the other agitate for their biological needs to.
Wait, so you're using the word victims, all right? in describing a group of people that the media is putting out as children of the what do you call, the former president?
No, I'm using the word victim for the very persons who came up, who crop up that I am a biological son or daughter.
That's what I said. You're using the word victim to describe those who came up as the children of the former president.
Yes.
Okay.
But on the other hand, the coverage that the media gave to us also they shape it in that perspective and frame it to our view.
Okay, so apart from the perspective that you got, where did you get the perspective that there were some people that apparently are the children of the former president?
Could you come again, please?
How did you get to know that there were some people that are children of the former president?
Through the media.
Through the media?
Yes.
So is this a media creation or is a reality?
Well, I can say it is a blended service.
So you realize that you cannot even answer that. That in itself is a mediatized, agenda. It's a mediatized issue. It's a mediatized discourse. And that's the point I'm making. The idea that media shapes and frames public discourse. Right now, you're unable to tell any other source apart from the media source. Now, if we have to drill down from the media source, then the point is what or which parties were involved in the dissemination or in the claims of these people being the children of the former president. Which parties were involved in the claims?
The media.
Okay, and who?
And those who
have come, and the victims.
And then the victims.
And the victims.
People who have come forward, isn't it?
Yes, the victims.
So exactly. So the point is then that if the knowledge of the former president being, having other children had only come to you as a result of media's coverage on that, and the parties involved in the claims are again the people who are the center, that is, those you claim are the victims. No other sources.
Yes.
Right? How would you claim that it's not a mediatized, discourse, but it's a reality?
I think it's both.
So say the reality here has to do with
whether they are or not. That's what I mean.
Yes.
That's the reality we're talking about, whether they are or not. Now, if the media has not exhausted the points of point of evidence, all right, which can include the victims, to use your word, and I'm surprised you use the word victims, but let's say they're victims, all right? If the only source of claim or only source of validation is the people themselves and no other source, and you would actually believe it as reality, then I'm surprised. And that's why we're talking about mediatization. The idea that media shapes people's thinking in order that they believe what they say. It's exactly what
this is true or false from the media perspective, then that is mediatization.
That's the point I'm making. So in your judgment, you as an audience listening to media, all right, you now have to have
taken a stand.
Foster. Yeah, you have to come in as and when. You don't interrupt.
Okay, sir.
Now, thank you, sir. So you, the audience, has to have the ability to actually ask yourself, how do you come to know that this is a reality, but this is not a media creation? And that's the problem that we're having. And that's why we're saying that the theory of mediatization means that it is the media that is influencing our knowledge, using certain mechanisms without even we realizing that they're actually shaping our behavior or shaping our understanding. Are you following the conversation? Yes, please. So when we talk about mediatization, we do not actually mean that media is covering or not covering, or media is covering more or covering less. We are talking about how media actually covers in a manner that may not reflect the reality, but their own predispositions or the predispositions of the sponsors of news. All right. So if you take sponsors of news, it could be the owner of the media trying to push certain agenda, and that's where agenda setting comes in. All right. Or trying to prime some issues over the other using these, media mechanisms, making it kind of making us believe as though they are reality, but they may not. So we're talking about that as a situation of mediatization. Are you following it? Yes. Are you following the conversation?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, those guys who have your hands up, is it new or the old one? If it's an old one, make sure you put your hands down because it confuses me that.
It's new.
It's new. Okay, Najat.
So can you say that media shapes our reality?
But that's the conversation we're talking about. Currently, Foster's reality is being shaped by media because he's seen some so-called, victims being interviewed by media, and they're making claims that they are children of the former president, and he's believing that's the reality. So that's exactly what we're talking about. Yeah? Okay. So let's move on. So what happens when government and journalism, all right, you can replace it with media. What happens when government and journalism become network? Now, the idea of mediatization actually also means that there is a situation of a network or a fusion between government or political class and journalism or media, all right? There's a fusion, which means there is a certain lack of independence, all right? There's a certain, promotion of cooperation, or maybe cooperation would be a bad word, but of, interdependence, or maybe that could also be the bad word. But there's some kind of a fusion, a come together of media and government, or media and journalism. And the question is, what happens when that happens? I mean, what are the implications when media and journalism become one or become network? What do you think happens? When media and
is it media and government or media?
Yeah, when government and media or government and journalism become network, what happens? What do you think are the implications? Don't forget, we are talking about the overliness of media in political communication. Bequin, Eric Bequin.
So I think if the government and journalism become one, or let's say they sleep on one bed, the issue that's supposed to be brought up for it to be looking at won't come out, because the journalists or the media are in bed with the government, and hence they will be influenced by the government, or the government may influence their decision in some certain way. That's
Excellent.
how I
Excellent. So there's a lack of independence. There could be lack of transparency. And of course, biases come in, isn't it? From the point that you have actually raised. All right. Ajo? Is it how I pronounce it right? Ajo?
Yes, sir. The name is Ajo.
Okay, Ajo. Yeah.
Okay. So usually what happens when governments and journalists or like media work together is that information is filtered for a purpose. Yes, and usually it's used to persuade or influence and get an agenda to be done.
Excellent.
Okay, and most of the time too, the media or journalists lose their freedom.
Yeah.
They are controlled. Yes.
Control. Excellent. Thank you. Who else?
Governments ends up benefiting.
Okay, yeah, so it weighs towards government benefit. Foster.
Oh, my hand is not up.
So always put it down when you're
yes,
done reacting.
Thank
Okay, Peter.
Thank you.
Okay, so the media, in a way, there should be check and balance between the media and then the government. The media, one function of the media is also to make sure that they are putting the government on their toes. And they are, yeah, so when you look at this issue, for instance, the Galamsey issue, you can see that with merging the media and then the government didn't really help, because it got to a time citizens were lambasting the media for, in a way, collaborating with the government to not, fight the Galamsey to our expectations. So when you merge the media with the government, you realize that it gives the government that freedom in order to do whatever, to go away with even the wrong things that they do.
Okay.
Instead of, because the media is not able to hold the government accountable.
Okay.
Because the two are merged. So whatever blame they share.
Okay. Great point. Thanks. Najat.
So please, when you merge the government and the media, the government simply becomes the media.
Okay. So when there's a network,
simply becomes the
media, yeah. Okay.
So the functions of the media is now given to the government. The government is now being the primer, the framer, everything. The media just becomes the channel for it to bring out whatever it wants to be out. But the media won't have any say in what happens.
Yeah. Okay. Good point. Thanks. Obviously, most of it has been negative, but what about the positives? Okay.
Sir.
Mary, say something before.
So what I know is the media, if the government and the media emerge, the media that is supposed to be the watchdog of the government, it can't serve that purpose again, because the government will be there, will be controlling what the media will say at the end of the day.
All right, thank you. Yeah, Bequeen.
And sir, from what we've said and what you have explained to us, it means there is no way the media can collaborate with the government. But I think we have some positive side that the media can also merge with the government in some other way. Let's say the fighting of COVID-19, I think it is a shared responsibility. So if the government is putting in an effort to make sure that we all follow the safety protocols, and the media do not help by educating or educating the public on these issues, how will the message even get to the people? And I think with this thing, it is a collaboration with the government, the media and the government to fight this kind of such issues.
Okay, a good perspective. But let me ask you something, and that's an observation I've made. A lot of times, you guys try to, I mean, not all of you, but there's a tendency for you to actually introduce judgment in your submission. We didn't actually say that it was a bad thing. We were looking at implications, which means when we say implications, it means that there's a positive and there's the negative.
Okay.
In your submission, you said from what we have said, it means the media cannot. That's not what it means.
Okay.
Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
And yesterday, this morning, yesterday, I put a clip, a media clip on one of my students last year, which your predecessors group's platform for them to watch. I've seen the tendency for most Ghanaian journalists, using certain values, when I say values, I mean certain judgment on what, sometimes respondents say, i.e. interpreting what they think the respondent means in them. And I think it's a practice, it's a social issue for most Ghanaians, and it becomes a professional, behavior. Do not try to interpret what people mean for them.
Okay, sir.
You have to go ahead with your submission. And then perhaps if you want to draw the attention, whether they mean that, you can say that. But don't say, from what we have discussed, it means no. That's wrong.
All right, sir. Thanks for the correction.
That's all right. So always be aware of that. Otherwise, you'll be reading people's
minds.
Exactly. That's not
all right. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, excellent. All right. So now when we're talking about the implications, so we talked about the negative ones. What is the positive implication? Which of course, it's been started off, by Eric. Eric just highlighted some of the positive implications for government and journalism networked. Okay, let's listen to Jessica.
So I believe when the government and journalism networks, government policies can easily be communicated.
So Jessica,
in a thorough and detailed manner to the form of third-party influence, because then the citizens can get.
Go ahead. Jessica.
Whatever the government is intending.
Okay, I think we've got the import of what you meant. So there is a free flow of information, right? All right, thank you, from government perspective. Okay, Gordon. Gordon, you're on mute, so. Gordon, can you unmute yourself? All right, let's move on. Jennifer, you wanted to say something?
Yes, sir. I think when the government and journalists work together, they give the citizenry a chance to talk, a chance to forward their grievances to the right authorities. Example, in a community that they are faced with challenges, if there is a community radio or anything, and they have direct link with the government, they are able to channel their grievances through the media to the appropriate quarters.
Okay, thank you. Gordon, if you can hear me, you're on mute, so we can't hear what you're saying. All right, thank you. So let's have a look at what journalism does for politics. All right, so in this conversation, in terms of either mediatization or networked, what do you call government journalism, relationship, we're saying that, politics or journalism actually, provides information, for the political system. And they do that in terms of fact giving, fact checking. They record or they put, on record, or they actually, what do you call, they put in repository, information. They provide statistics, they support events, or they organize events. So you will see quite a number of events that are being organized by, media houses. They also preempt policies, all right, in terms of advocating for some issues, in terms of priming some issues. We know that issues of Galamsey, for example, became prominent in the campaigns, and policies were drafted around it because of some of the activism by journalists, all right? Again, journalism provides the political system deliberation, all right? So it instigates debate, it instigates analysis, comment, and opinion, all right? Journalism actually brings that to bear. And then, of course, journalism actually, provides or, instigate accountability, yeah? So through investigation, audit, obviously journalism would talk about how many hospitals we have and whether the number of hospitals we have are enough to support our fight, against COVID-19, etc. They provide voice for citizens, as we have actually highlighted, and they, embark on campaigns like wear your mask campaigns, etc. So journalism actually provides all these. And so, they canceled my flight. Okay, sorry. So journalism actually provides all these. And so when we talk about, network journalism and government in a network positions. We're talking about journalism providing political system, some of these issues, all right? But then there's also the other side of it, which we say that when journalism and politics, are in that relationship and certain conditions are not available, it could be negative. And so we highlighted lack of independence, control, so many other things that we actually talked about, all right? Now, again, when we talk about mediatization and the idea that the media had been overly predominant in shaping political discourse or in shaping political communication, we talk about the existence or the emergence of issues like that: saturation, acceleration, disintermediation, and of course volume and variety. So with saturation, who can actually tell us the common understanding of saturation? Not even related to media or journalism or political system or political communication, but in terms of saturation. What's the meaning of saturation? What's the meaning of saturation? Yeah? Saturation, who can explain that? Okay, Loretta. Loretta, you're on mute. Unmute yourself. Okay, Jennifer, you can go ahead.
I think saturation means how something dissolves.
Okay, how something dissolves. All right. Okay, thank you. Who else? Peter, what does saturation mean?
So saturation, in the science perspective, is how something is soaked or dissolved normally in liquid. If you are able to put, let's say, sugar in water, and
so just like
enough of it,
right? Just like
yes.
Jennifer said, but we're doing communication, and you are giving me scientific definition.
So you said how we understand it, the normal understanding.
The normal understanding.
Understanding.
From communication. The context here is communication. That's why I said not from political communication perspective, but meaning of saturation. So I'm talking about communication. Yeah. Okay. By the way, maybe I wasn't clear, but I'm talking about communication. When we say saturated, what are we talking about? Okay, Mary.
I would say understanding, how you understand some information.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Peter. Oh, Peter, you've spoken already. Okay. Destiny, you haven't spoken, sir. Destiny.
Okay, so I'm thinking about is the way something is being absorbed. So in terms of media, we say that the way information is put out, that fills the minds of people or the publics.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. All right. Who else?
Sir, can you also say how people are satisfied with information?
Okay. Right. Not really, but yeah. Let's say, Gordon, your line was up now. Do you want to speak, because you've been on hold for some time? Oh, okay. Let me see who else. Abigail, come in.
Yes, sir. Please, to my understanding, is how the media sees the interest of their audience. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Mike.
To also try, I would say, to get so much soaked with an information that you wouldn't want to get any from any other source. An example, the election petition that was broadcast by the media.
Mm-hmm.
The public got so soaked into it that they wouldn't hear anything from any other source.
Yeah. So we're talking about the overliness, or we're talking about the too much of information. All right. So in terms of communication, when we talk about saturation, the idea that the system had been overly, given information in such that it becomes, what do you call, too much, or it becomes, too dominant. All right. So we're saying that in mediatization, there's saturation of, political communication, which means that there is nothing for discussion but politics. All right. In terms of mediatization of political communication, when you wake up in the morning, you tune on to the TV, it's politics. You tune on to the radio, it's politics. You tune on to, you take the newspaper, it's politics. The only business in town is political communication. Abigail, you want to say something? Those of you, when you lift your hand, you have to put it down. Check the reaction and put your hand down. Okay, so that it does not confuse me. All right. So we talk about saturation, mediatization of political communication. It breeds saturation. All right. It makes almost every dimension of our social discourse becomes political. All right. And that's what we're talking about. The idea that there's no game in town other than political, information or political communication is what we're talking about. What about acceleration? What do we mean by acceleration? Anyway, you can actually have the literal meaning of that, or you can tell me the literal meaning. What do you mean by acceleration? Najat, you're laughing or you're smiling. Okay. Yeah, Mike.
I'm giving the layman's term.
Okay, Najat.
So to accelerate means to get to a higher level.
Okay, that's a good point. Yeah. Okay. All right. To get to a higher level. Okay, who else? Mike. Yes.
The speed at which information is disseminated into the public.
Fantastic. Yeah, speed. We're talking about speed. Yeah. Francisca, any other idea? Any other idea? Anything different? Okay. So we're saying.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Go on.
Yes, I was saying the fastness of something, how fast something is.
Excellent. So in mediatization, in the age of mediatization, we're saying that journalism is on a very top speed. Yeah, we're just running. So if you look at the culture of the newsroom, all right, or the traditional media, how news got to be produced, would you say is the same as today?
No.
Okay, so who can tell me, describe then and now, the behavior of the newsroom or journalism? Eric.
Sir, when you look at then and now everybody wants to be the first to break the news. Fantastic. So when the issue come or the story come, they don't take their time to go through and fast check or get the accuracy of the information before putting it out there. So you can get an instant where the information, a break of news that former president Kufuor is dead, and they will not verify it, they will put it in the public. Meanwhile, it is a fake news. So in a rushing to be the first to break the news, then it becomes like that.
Absolutely. The horse race reporting culture, the horse race, the first, the idea that I want to be the first to have, the news out, breaking news culture. Breaking news, yes, we have it, that's so. And because of that breaking news culture, Gordon, you now can, talk. Let's hear you. Gordon? Okay, so we're saying that in the age of mediatization, Najat, let me give you the chance before I come in.
Okay, so I would say in this sense, I'm talking about the channels of communication. At first, it used to be the print news that was most predominant. So the speed was a bit low. But now social media, the phones, the technologies. So the moment you hear something, you just type it out and it's out. And people are sharing it and it's getting to thousands of people.
That's it.
Yeah, so that's the speed.
Fantastic.
My version of the speed.
Excellent. Yeah. So one of the characterization of mediatization, the output of it as well, we're saying that now the processes of news production has been accelerated, all right, has been sped up to the level that it's affecting accuracy of news. So speed has replaced accuracy. And as you know, Eric actually highlighted, the idea that I want to be the first to have reported it is actually taking over or taking control of the news production practices of pre-news, what do you call it? During and then post-production activities. So the pre-production, the during production, the post-production activities are now become seamless, all right? To the extent that you don't even see what is pre-production and what is during production. Production, pre-production, and during production processes are now seamless, are now together in a very fast-paced newsroom environment, to the extent that people are not even doing the traditional editorial judgment, all right, because they want to be the first to have reported. So we're saying that one of the effects of mediatization that we can see is that there is an acceleration of news production to the extent that it is affecting quality. All right, nobody's cross-checking. Now, somebody comes to the former president's funeral and says that I am the son or the daughter of former president, Rawlings. You do not take that through editorial judgment. You go and put mic in front of their mouth. You put camera on them and say, tell your story. Oh, I'm the son of former president. I'm a daughter of former president. And it's in the news and is in the public. Do you think previously editorials would allow that? The editors of previous journalism, would they allow that?
No.
And you say that it's not mediatization, it's reality. So I can just jump onto the former president's funeral and say, I'm Kobe Mensah Rawlings. I'm the daughter and the son of former Rawlings. And then, hey, another one, let's hear you. Where are you from? I'm from GIJ. Is that what is called reality or mediatization?
Mediatization.
So that's the point we're making. We're saying that the theory of mediatization is saying we have suspended some kind of attribute of news production. We have sped up news production, replaced accuracy with speed, just because we want to be the first to have put the story out. Are you following now what we are discussing?
Yes, please.
And I'm sure you now understand the import of what we're talking about as mediatization. So we're saying that one of the effects of mediatization or the output of mediatization is acceleration. The idea that things are on top speed. Yeah. And so we wanted to be the first to have projected who won the election. We can tell you here and now that party A is this, party B is this. It is coming from ourselves. No other media but us. We're saying that. You get the import. So that's what we're talking about, acceleration. So I hope you understand acceleration, right? The idea that we have almost, fused together the processes of news media, and then we are just producing. And as Najat actually talked about, even currently, most traditional media houses are taking story from online, from bloggers, from social media, and reporting it in mainstream without editorial judgment or with least editorial judgment. In fact, people are gathering news and they are sending them via WhatsApp. They will not even exercise editorial judgment, and boom, it's been disseminated. Yeah? Are you getting it?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. Now, disintermediation. Who can tell us about disintermediation? Now, I'm taking you to Brofu school, right? Brofu? Disintermediation. Who can explain? Loretta?
For me, I think intermediation is where we have connection between two parties. Mm-hmm. So if you are doing this intermediation, then it means you are going to disconnect that middlemen or gatekeepers.
Fantastic.
So with communication or how mediatization is, you are going to disconnect every middleman between the media and them. Yeah.
Absolutely. So although we have said that there's a network, government media relationship, and we're saying that with mediatization means there is a seamless relationship between government and media in a network fashion, in order that media is even becoming the mouthpiece of government as opposed to being independent. And also we have described the benefits even of that relationship despite the negatives. We're also saying that because of mediatization, there is a high sense of disintermediation, meaning that the parties involved in political communication are becoming fed up of mediatization. And so they want to bypass the media to have a direct relationship with themselves. So despite the idea of networked government and media, politicians are frustrated that media is exerting too much influence on what they say, that media is even spinning what they say. Media is not communicating rightly what the politicians mean to the people. They're embellishing it with their own understanding and their own ideological standpoint. And so they feel that the people are being misinformed. Because of that, the political class want to have a direct engagement with the citizenship without the help of media. And that is one of the output of mediatization. All right, Peter.
So, sir, is that achievable?
No, that one is another question. So we're talking about, the product or the output of mediatization. So whether it's achievable or not, we'll come to look into that. So the same way from the perspective of the voters or from the citizenry, the citizens think that the media is actually gatekeeping. They decide what they think is important. They are priming the issues. All right. So they go to a village, there is a community disease there. They don't want to talk about that, but they want to talk about, some kind of procurement, issues that has happened between the politicians in the local area. Maybe the DCE has actually done something that they think they have to report. The media thinks that the political story will spread like wildfire, but the community disease that is actually coming out as a result of some gutters somewhere is not so important to them. So the media is priming that. Community becomes disengaged, becomes frustrated, and now they want to talk to the political class themselves, all right? So they want to bypass the media in order that they can have direct access with politics. We're talking about disintermediation. So we're saying that the mediatization that is happening now is also fostering, or is also breeding sentiments of disintermediation. And as Peter asked the question, is that possible? That's why we see quite a lot of social media activities. That's why we see quite a lot of journalists or politicians, having their own channel in order that they can actually speak to, the voters directly. That's why we see community, engagement.
Journalism.
Community journalism, exactly. All right. Now, remember that I told you about the media as an entity and the media as a channel. So community journalism may be journalism, all right, but it would not or may not be the established media that is actually, priming, that is actually gatekeeping the issues. Because with that local media or that local or the community journalism, all those factors that would make the media mediatized political communication are removed, including ownership, including censorship, etc. They're all removed. It is bare knuckle journalism between them and the political class. Are you understanding it?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any questions or contribution about disintermediation? Peter, do you understand your question, whether it is possible or not?
Yes, sir, somehow. Yes, sir.
Okay. So the possibility or not is in the advent of social media. And we're saying that social media had made it possible for the parties, the voters or the citizens and the politicians to come together for direct conversation. But even then, we can still see some lapses, isn't it? For example, the idea that people may not have access to data and so access the communication channels, the idea that even within the social media, the issue of miscommunication, fake news, somebody sitting in their rooms and crafting some message and put it in there just because they wanted to achieve a certain agenda is also high. All right. So regardless of the issue of mediatization and our sense of disintermediation, there are still some lapses, but that is the output of mediatization. People are fed up with the media's assumed power and influence on the communication. And so they want to have a direct engagement with the parties involved. Is that clear? Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. And so volume and variety, I'm sure it's, what do you call, self-explained. As we have talked about, saturation and acceleration is increasing the volume of political communication or political information that we have, and it's creating a clutter, all right, that people do not even know which is right because there are so many variety of perspectives. Events happen, things happen, and media houses are explaining it from perspective. In fact, as we speak, some people have understanding of COVID from a completely different perspective because some media house is actually articulating one angle. Some is actually saying that even the word COVID has become a mediatized issue because all of us are calling it COVID, which the English people are saying is wrong. It's not called COVID, it's called COVID because there's no R after the O. So, and we picked up that pronunciation, perhaps from the media, discourse. So that in itself is a mediatization issue, right? Okay. So now let's look at the vicious cycle of mediatization. We're saying that this is how mediatization is happening. More faster media, all right, or more faster political communication, increased spin because we see almost every issue that comes, we are not able to see to the bottom of it, or we're not able to tell which part is true or not, all right? Because there's so many, angles to them. There's so many frames. Some will say this, some will say that. This media house is saying this media, and the citizens becomes confused, all right? Because we don't know what is the truth or what is the actual situation or what is the spin one, all right? There's always spin going on. And then of course, more cynical public. So because of mediatization, public is becoming what? Very, very cynical, untrustworthiness of the political system or of the media itself, because we don't know. Right after the election, a lot of people have called some media houses out, isn't it? People say, oh, as for these people, they belong here. As for these people, they belong. Why? Because the public now cannot actually tell which media house has that credibility to put out information. And we're now questioning. All right. So public had become so cynical, of the media stations or the media platforms and more aggressive social media. Because of that, we're taking matters into their own hands, isn't it? We are now producing our own reports. We're now putting our own versions, and we're now being aggressive, attacking. You see a lot of people attacking journalists, all right, on social media, attacking authorities on social media. People feel that they are being, suppressed by the powers of the media as well as the powers of, the political class. And so they want to, go out and do their own thing. And so we see quite a lot of Kofi TV, Ama TV, I'm doing production this, I'm doing that. Everybody now has his own TV station, trying to put out what they think is the reality, in the public's domain. Of course, politics has become media oriented, as I mentioned earlier. Any questions or contribution? Any questions or contribution? Okay. Does it matter? Mediatization, does it matter? So we are saying that spin, truthfulness and trust has been undermined, all right? Because of spin, we have undermined truthfulness and we have undermined trust. So it is difficult for you to tell what is truth. All right. And it is difficult for you to have a trusting relationship with, the media, with the political class, for example. And even to some extent, political class do not even trust the citizens. And even media do not even trust the citizens, for example. And then politicization of civil servants. The idea that the civil servants are supposed to be, for example, neutral, which means each time there's a government, you have the civil servants as the mediators of public service. Because of politicization, there's that lack of civil servant identity. All right. There's always, or there had been, what we call the tail wags the dog scenario. Because of mediatization, instead of media following policy pronouncement, right now it's actually media, agenda setting policies. And of course, that is also subject to discussion, because there's the awareness of media as a player, within the democratic, realms. And then, of course, focus on immediate result, not long term, as we have actually said. In mediatization, there's a high focus on what short-term results as opposed to long-term. So instead of the media thinking about the sustenance of the society in a certain long-term perspective, they are looking at their short-term gains, their profitability, the idea that viewership would go high because they were the ones who actually reported that Jerry Rollins has so many kids. So many things that are actually happening, And then, of course, chilling of policy deliberations, the idea that just discussions on policy end up, being very being very, antagonistic, kind of exercise, very, very, adversarial exercise. And you hear that mostly on TV, on radio. You see people, or even amongst our own selves, people will be discussing a certain policy direction, a certain policy positions, and then it takes a very, antagonistic or a very adversarial tone. Journalism is no longer trusted by the people. All right. But we're saying that in the face of mediatization, politicians themselves have a problem with political journalism, because they feel that political journalism is not accountable to the power they hold. All right. Since the repeal of the criminal libel law, a lot of people feel that journalists have become too powerful, that they're abusing their power. The idea that they can investigate people anyhow, put the stories there. By the time you go and check, it is not true. All right. By which time the reputation of the individual has been tarnished. All right. We hear stories that, yes, this, this report is actually not a true reflection. Even the current reportage or the current investigation done by, this Joy FM guy, what's his name? Manasseh, on the procurement guy. The procurement guy came out to say that he actually came to him, he's a friend, and he came to him that he wanted to do so many, issues. And he thinks that it was not professional, it was not, so many other concerns that they had. People have complained about the behavior of journalists ascribing themselves too much power and going ahead to actually character assassinate people. Whether it's founded or unfounded, we can't tell. But these are concerns that are being expressed by politicians and, of course, to some extent, by some citizens as well. All right. The former regional minister that was actually removed as a result of a journalist reportage also had some concerns. So we're saying that in mediatization, there's a concern that journalists do not have or do not display accountability of the power, or are not accountable, of the power that they have. Of course, biases, all right? The idea that there are, biases in, journalism, not even the clear ones. Eric.
Sir, what about these media organizations like Media Foundation, GJA? What did they say after, upon serving the interest of the journalists? But I think they also check what journalists do, the actors in that form. Oh.
Well, you see, the character of journalism is such that punitive measures will serve as, or could serve as, gagging. All right. So even at some point where the principles or the code of conduct of journalism is actually broken, and whether even the GIJ actually has a code of conduct at all. I remember there was a time they were trying to propose something like that, and some people complained that it would end up being like a gagging tool. So journalism has not refined, code of practice, for example, as you would have in accounting and other professions. Why? Because itself rests, or its image and its potency rest on freedom of, do you get it? And so that freedom is actually it actually comes into contact with anything that actually sounds as punitive, it becomes negative, to the tenets of journalism. And that's why some people think that it has allowed the journalist to become too powerful and unnecessarily, tarnishing the images of people, because anything that suggests control or suggests best behavior is actually considered as punitive to the principles of journalism. But there is supposed to be a self-regulatory ethical conduct, all right, or something that are internally censored. So you as a journalist must understand your ethics, your code of conduct, etc., in order that you can exercise those values in the production of news. But it doesn't actually happen like that. And the institutions that are supposed to be the oversight, which although they cannot be oversight because of the character of journalism, are also unable to, to do that. I mean, have you ever heard a journalist being suspended before?
No.
Yeah, because immediately you go into that, kind of, practice, it would be gagging, it would be trying to prevent. Yeah, Eric.
So, it's an experience.
Yeah.
I was with one media house, the big media house in Ghana, and there was an issue between the media house with a minister. And the issue was settled, but later on within the media house, the editor was suspended for about 2 months, but it didn't come out in the public. It within us.
Yeah.
And we all know that it was because of what happened between the media house and the minister that led to his suspension.
Yeah, but you see, the journalist can actually take the media house on as having been having exercised misconduct. Obviously, internal organizations have their own rules and regulations, and so is the profession. The principles of the profession, the journalism profession, is that someone must have freedom of thought. All right, must feel free in their heads to do what they do. Do you get it? Having taken that measure, although administratively, has or could impact negatively on these individuals' future competencies. Do you understand the point I'm making?
Yes, sir.
So in future, or even amongst those of you who were not directly impacted by that action, tomorrow, Eric, when you're going to do that report, that will serve as a detriment for you, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
So you'll be thinking, if I go and do this story, Osumesi's problems will be for me. That you have been impacted by that action. So,
yes. Can I mention the scenario? Can I mention the media house?
Oh, I mean, it's academic freedom. You can, and whatever we discuss here is not supposed to be taken out, and you are supposed to.
All right, sir.
Everybody is supposed to respect that academic freedom. So for me, I always say that if I make an example in class, whether it affects a politician or it affects somebody else, you can't take me out. If you take it out, I will deny it because it's.
So I was.
So you can say it. Yeah, go on.
I was with Adom FM when this issue came. The for sanitation. when the issue came, I think when the woman bashed the lady for calling her being an intern, and yes, the editor asked us to publish the story. So later on, the minister, after the issue came out and it became so serious, the issue was settled between the media house and then the minister. But later on, the media house called a meeting and they suspended the editor for going ahead to approve for the issue to be published out there.
Mm-hmm.
So with this one, do you think the editor is at fault, looking at what the minister did?
Okay, so you would say that from the journalism principles perspective, the editor was not at fault. Do you get it? Because from the journalism, principle perspective, you're not supposed to have anything that weighs on your thought for a story to go on, other than some ethical considerations which are inherent, as I said, and which are actually inherent in the discipline. Now, if the editor had exercised all those judgments and had come to conclusion that indeed they do not hamper, or they do not actually serve as a barrier to publishing of the story, it shouldn't be. But ask yourself, why was the editor suspended? It was because of an external force, isn't it? Because of the minister's complaint. So it means that in the normal sense of his duty, the editor had nothing to fear. But the news organization had gone ahead to suspend the editor because of an external force, external pressure. And that in itself is a bad practice. Are you with me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So he wasn't at fault. The media house is actually at fault. And that is the control that we are talking about. The idea that the news outlet had taken an action against the editor as a result of a minister's pressure. Thomas.
Okay. So later on, the editor has resigned. He resigned from the company. So he's no more there with them.
Exactly.
Again.
Because that was the tenet of journalism. Mm-hmm. Thomas.
Yes, sir. What I want to know is, was the issue that the editor brought out, was it the fact? Was it the truth? Because if it were to be the fact, I don't think that the station or where he was working would have gone ahead to punish him for bringing something that was a fact.
I think a lot of us are aware of the story, isn't it? Where apparently the what do you call, the national service person had called the minister. The minister used some, unpalatable words, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. And
so the issue that led to his suspension was, why did he recorded the woman without asking for permission? Because the lady didn't ask for permission before recording the woman. So they think it's unethical in journalism. The lady should have asked for permission before recording the woman. But in this point, she didn't ask for permission, and she recorded her. And later on, the editor put the thing out there.
But the point again is that, does journalism request or require that you ask permission to record a public official?
No.
It is not a requirement. It is not a requirement. Otherwise, investigative journalists can't do their work.
Yeah.
It is not a requirement, especially when you're a public official. I mean, when it's a private conversation, that's completely a different story. But issues of public knowledge or issues of public concern or public interest, no journalist is asked that you ask permission, from the public official that, can I record you? That is not journalism.
But sir, we officially called the woman that we want to interview her on this issue.
That in itself is consent, isn't it? So once she agrees that you interview her, I don't see where the permission must come in.
Okay.
Do you get it? I don't see.
Yes, I do.
Once the minister has granted, now it's a different thing if the minister hadn't granted the interview. And even that, you have to report it, that we tried to reach the minister, she declined, isn't it? Once she agrees to the interview, she can't say you should ask my permission to record me. How do you then do your job as a journalist? Okay, I think there are some hands up. Yvette.
Yeah. Can I speak, sir?
No, Yvette.
First, okay.
Sir, I actually want to add something to what Eric was saying.
Yeah.
Actually, when she asked permission from the minister, she didn't grant her the permission, but she had already started recording the thing.
Okay.
And that was what brought about the whole issue. So the way the woman approached her was what caused the editor to make us publish the thing online. And with that, the editor now called her personally with his number, and she blasted the editor on that particular phone too. So my editor recorded that scenario too, and then they published it online, and it became a whole issue here and there.
Okay, that's a good point. So from an administrative perspective, you would actually say that perhaps the editor may not have exercised good judgment, especially when you had called on your own private number, had a conversation, and then of course have recorded that and added it to the reportage. Perhaps you would say that. But the idea that even a public official, had called, I mean, you've been contacted by media and have declined, giving interview, which is within your own right. But the media house must go ahead to report that we tried to reach this Osumesi on this issue and they declined. But if they declined and you had gone ahead to actually record and then you play whatever they say, I think that would be unethical, and perhaps that could actually, result in that issue. But for it to go ahead to actually, penalize the editor, I think that is also overboard, because there are many ways of media houses, righting the wrongs that they do, including putting out, what do you call it? What's the article?
Rejoinder.
The rejoinder. By writing a rejoinder, not necessarily going ahead to sanction that person. So they could have written a rejoinder, to that effect, isn't it? Foster.
Yes, please. Yeah, from the narratives that my colleague gave in respect of the media house,
yeah,
the minister, and then the editor. So in this instance, it means that the media and government network, what happened means that should be a negative aspect of their connection. Am I presenting
idea
it
that
well?
the minister brings weight or power onto that. Yeah.
So that scenario could be termed as a negative aspect of the connection or the network of media house or journalism and the government.
That's correct. Yes. Thank you. Okay.
Please say, like, from all the discussions about the editor and his resigning, like what I've observed is that if the media house is a private media house, it has its own house rules. So if it decides to fire the person or not, it will always rely on it being private and justify the reason why it did that. But if it was to be a public thing, it will be a different situation. So I think those who are saying it wasn't right for the editor to be fired, because the ADOM is a private institution, you cannot tell them what to do. It's private. It's not a government institution.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm right.
No, you're making a point, but your end of submission is a problem. It's a problem because when it comes to media and when it comes to journalism, we talked about it. I think when we come to a manufacturing concern, you look at the controls, that we have on the media's and the media's performance of as a result. You see, profitability is one of the controls, all right? And the idea that, government would or would not give, some revenues like advertising revenues, all right, is one of the reasons or one of the tools that political systems use to control media. So in this case, Adom FM, as a private media house, is forced to take an action because of a perceived profitability issue. That if you don't take action, that ministry may not give you advertisement to do. That ministry may not grant you, future interviews or news gathering. You get it? And all those influences. From journalism perspective, it doesn't matter whether it's a private or it's a public, platform. They are all supposed to connect to the same principles of journalism. But the reality also is that in instances where the media house or the platform is private, where is their focus? Is it profitability or is it about public service? Are you with me? And that's what the point is. So we're not making judgment right or wrong, whether it is a private or it's a public. We are discussing right or wrong from the perspective of journalistic principles, all right? But then the idea of public and private also comes into play, all right? And therefore, the result could be different. Because if it were a public journalism situation or journalistic issue, then of course a rejection could be enough, because taking that person on resigning or whatever could actually lead to, unrest from, what do you call, trade union perspective. The association within there will say that that is, not right, because there are other, modalities that
ways of handling.
But that speaks to the unaccountability of journalistic power that we are talking about. To, at what point do we say that journalism must take responsibility of their behavior? And at what point would people be satisfied by that responsibility? So if you publish rejoinder, does that actually take away perhaps the reputational damage that you have caused the minister? Again, that's another question, right? And that's why we talk about in the exercising of accountability of power, journalists must actually look within their ethical conduct, all right, and make sure that they are not unnecessarily, causing harm to people's reputation. Are you guys clear on that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yes, please. Yes.
All right, great. So we talk about obsession with processes, cynicism, lack of information, lack of expertise, loss of local press. And I'm particularly, very much against the practice of beaming, Accra radio stations content onto local areas, where you go on and you see breakfast show of Joy FM broadcast in a local area because they say they are sister nation, they are satellite. I think it's a bad practice, because it is then entrenching the established mediatization on local, issues, and that is wrong. All right. And then also we have journalists' own problems with political journalism. The idea that there's lack of resources. All right. The political system is a very complicated one, very sophisticated one. And so without adequate resources, journalism cannot function properly. Corruption is not a small matter. It's a very complex world, all right, including so many players. So if you do not actually resource journalists very well, they cannot, unwire, corruption issues. They cannot actually trace corruption issues. Now, the issue of policy and its benefit on societal good, all right, it's also a complex one. Now, sometimes you hear some journalists discussing policy issues, and it's so simplistic, because they do not have the ability to actually appreciate the effect of policy in its wider form, all right? And so the need for training, empowerment, the need for resourcefulness of journalism is also an issue for journalists, that there is not enough capacity building in order that they could actually do their work well. Look at fact finding, all right? That is emerging in Ghana. Now, a lot of media has actually doing fact finding. Even then, it is an issue because quite a lot of them do not have the capacity to really do a fact finding, thing. If they can, why is it that everybody is bundling around saying Jerry's daughter, Jerry's son? I hear there's a man about almost 70 years. They say he's a Jerry's son. How can a 70-year-old man be the son of the former president? Do you get it? Because there's not a capability to actually verify some of these things. Some of them are plain silliness because they are not able to go beyond the just interviewing somebody, which is bad. But there are some sophisticated issues as well that you expect resources to go with. Government secrecy, all right? We do not take it for granted that government will be transparent with its people. There are instances where government actually is not fair with its own people. And that's why the UN has this humanitarian intervention clauses, all right? In anticipation that at some point in time, governments may treat their own people badly. And that needs a resourceful journalism to actually identify and to find some of these, secrecies or some of these secret stuff that, government actually do. That, it is in the public interest to actually fish out, all right? Again, government and parties spin and manipulate information every day. I mean, this COVID that is going on, not only in Ghana, elsewhere, most countries, governments are fidgeting with the numbers. They want to look good. They want to actually say that we are performing better than other countries, etc. And when government does that, it is mediatization, because they are using the media to actually manipulate the thinking of the people. And it is about the same journalism that's supposed to what? Uncover some of these spin and make sure that they can put the reality out there. So that is also an issue. And we've talked about this intermediation already. And the idea that public is. Now, someone was actually, I think when we started the class, I think Foster was actually making references to the current court case and the suggestion that that has not been influenced by, and I think is somehow not the case, because you see, I tweeted that, and those of you, how many of you are on Twitter? How many of you are on? You as who? Jennifer. Jennifer, you are following me, right? Are you the one following me or somebody else?
I'll follow you now.
We'll go there.
Sorry?
We'll follow you soon.
Vincent, you are there, right?
We'll start following you.
Okay.
We'll start following you.
Sir, what's your handle?
It's the poet. So THEPOE_T, the poet.
Okay.
Yeah, and sometimes when you follow me, you'll be in trouble because I say things that people are not happy with.
That's what we want to hear. That's what we want to hear.
Yeah, so when you retweet some of my points, you come into contact with bashing. People will end up bashing you, etc. Right? But I don't particularly care. Okay. I don't particularly care about the bashing, and if you follow the case, all right, on the media, I mean in the media, right, especially on social media, you can see a clear case of PR in there, okay? And I tweeted that there's what we call legal PR going on now. You look at the way the case is run. Immediately after the court, yeah, you see each of the parties organizing press conferences. You've observed that, right?
Yes.
And when they organize a press conference, obviously they are not saying the same thing, isn't it? They're saying completely different things from sometimes what happened actually in court. And even look at the pictures that they put out, the images. Recent one was the guy who was speaking to Asirin Katia like the owl, right? So they use the owl. Have you seen that picture?
Yes.
They use the owl. It's like a meme, right? The guy is doing this. This is PR, okay? So the case itself, the substantive case itself is there, but the parties are interpreting them from their perspectives, all right? That they could look good in the eyes of the people, isn't it?
Yes.
So I tweeted that I need somebody to do that study. I mean, who would want to take up that as their project work to look at the effect of the media reporting on the case itself and on the understanding of the people, that is the citizens, about the case. All right. So we can actually do a study and look at to what extent are the people understanding the case, and where is that understanding coming from? Is it because of the media spin on it, or they are really following the court proceedings? Because these are two different things. What is being discussed in the media is not exactly the same as what is being talked about in the courtroom. Are you with me? So there is a huge PR operations going on in Ghana now with regards to how the court activities are being replayed in the media domain, and to what extent is that actually informing the electorate's mind about whether there's a case or there's no case, about whether Mahama has a case or has no case, about whether it has to be thrown out or it is do you get it? So there are a lot of PR going on this particular case, and these are some of the things that we're talking about. Foster.
Yes, please. Thank you very much. So with this scenario, the court issue, as you just explained, what would be where can we factor this particular issue into when it comes to what we are discussing?
Yeah, so that's the mediatization that we're talking about.
Okay.
So we are saying that there's so much media influences on the substantive case itself. All right.
Yeah.
That are laced with ideologies, people's predispositions, media owners' interest. I'm sure that when you tune into Kennedy Japan's TV station, what's the name?
Net2.
Net2. I'm sure that when you tune into Net2 to listen to the after court scenarios, all right, and maybe after a court proceedings, if you tune into Net2, I'm sure that if you had listened to the court processes, and after the court, you tune into Net2, I'm sure you're going to hear two different things.
Yeah.
The same way that
you would think you didn't even understand.
Can you imagine? The same way that right after the court, case, and then you tune into maybe TV XYZ, all right, you probably are going to have completely different understanding of what happened in the court.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's the PR that I'm talking about. So if you had one perspective, if you didn't have the chance to listen to what happened in court, and you had just tuned into Net2 or Radio XYZ just to follow what happened in court, I tell you, you have a completely different perspective. So, and that's the mediatization that we're talking about. The idea that the media had influenced what we know, all right, and what we must know, in order that it actually serves their interest other than the public's interest or other than the reality that we're talking about, is what we call the mediatization. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, so let's go on. So obviously the public's problem with political journalism is plenty, right? The idea that we don't believe it, the idea that we are becoming cynical to the issues, too belligerent, there's too much tension, animosity, too much process is boring, we find it boring, we think it's too complicated, etc. All right. And then, of course, the potential flaws of the new media. So all these problems has led to us trying to control our own narrative, control our own political communication, leading to citizens creating their own platforms, to put out the message. And that in itself had become a problem as well, because then it leads to misinformation, fake news, people propagating what is untruth, people having a simplistic understanding. So that when you read the tweets and the Facebook comments of people who probably had, or they claim to have followed the court case, sometimes you laugh because some of the things are so simplistic that you ask yourself, really, is that what actually happened? Because not everybody has the sophistication to even understand the court processes. So you hear people say, oh, the judge has dismissed it, oh, unfairly, or the judge has, oh, it was good that the judge dismissed it. But are you aware of the court processes? Do you understand the court procedures? For you to give judgment whether it was right to dismiss it or it wasn't right to dismiss it. You get the point I'm making? In our quest to bypass mediatization or to bypass mediation. And so this intermediation, we also end up faulting the process because we may not have the sophistication to appreciate what is happening. And so our interpretation of what is happening is so simplistic and doesn't even make sense. Sometimes even the sentences that we piece together is so complex that someone, when they read it, they don't even understand it. Yet we are saying that we want to use social media to put out the truth. Do you get it? To bypass mediatization. Yet we end up creating more problems. So yes, social media might have given us the freedom or the democratic, instances for us to push the issue, beyond what the media says or to bypass the ills of the media. We end up also creating other problems for ourselves. All right. And the dangers of new media, as we say, fragmentation, too many, voices out there. Today, everybody says they are influencers. Everybody says they are what do you call party communicators. Everyone says they are this, they are that. In fact, the area that even gets me is the people who call themselves what's their name? Those who give counselors, yeah, counselors. Everybody is a counselor in Ghana. Everybody is doing something. Everybody is, hey, it's not easy, and so there's so much fragmentation, so much polarization, bad information going on, propaganda going on, distraction, short attention span. All these things are happening. All right. Thanks, guys. Any questions or contributions before we wrap up? Because we're done. Yeah. Any question or contribution?
No question.
Okay. So I hope you understand it. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure meeting you.
Same here, sir.
Yeah.
Likewise.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, Peter.
Please, are you going to get the slides?
Yeah, of course. I thought the slides have already been shared.
Is it?
They were shared last 2 weeks or so.
This slides. Okay, then I'll check on
Anyway,
that.
I was trying to. Where is your class rep? So
I'm here.
Sorry.
I'm here, sir.
Okay, so you can send me an a WhatsApp. Yeah.
Okay, sir.
I'll put my number on the page.
Okay.
On the chat box. 226. Okay.
Okay, sir.
So you can see my number is on the chat box, right?
Yes, sir. I can see it.
All right. All right. So you can contact me anytime, guys. All right.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Please, I would like to ask a question, a general question.
Yeah, go ahead, Abigail.
So today, Akufo-Addo will be speaking. So do you think there'll be a lockdown or there wouldn't be a lockdown?
Hey, mommy.
He said it earlier on. He said it earlier on. Ghanaians are always reading people's mind.
Sister girl.
That is exactly what.
Okay, sir, do you think?
Abigail,
Yes, I think.
I'm on lockdown already, so I wish they lock you down as well.
So that we can continue with it.
Put the number
want them
on
to
your
lock down.
WhatsApp page. You are.
Because I'm on lockdown.
Food prices will go up.
That's right. Put the number on the page.
Okay, guys, hold on. There's something I needed to tell you. Just a minute. Somebody just mentioned food prices, and then it came to my mind. Let's see. Just a minute, please. Yeah. I have a study that I'm doing, a research on the lockdown, right?
Yeah, I saw it somewhere.
Okay, so have you guys answered it for me?
No, so we haven't seen it.
So it was immediately after your invite. So I think we rushed to join the class.
Oh, okay. So you have it on the platform. So please,
yes, please.
Try and how many are you in class? I think 40 something, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
We are more than that.
We are more than that.
Okay. Yes.
Please, the assignment.
Yeah.
The man when he
Which man?
Said something we are supposed to listen to and answer the questions.
Okay. So
yes.
Again, you have to learn how to use people's names. All right. People call uncle and aunties and in
Dominic.
Which is not, yeah. So you're talking about Dominic, right?
Yes.
Yeah, Dominic. Exactly.
Okay. I'll follow through and then see what it means. Okay. And I'll get back to you.
Sir. Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
That's all.
Yeah, please. Sir,
Yeah.
please, there are comments you gave. I don't understand this.
He says he will get back to us.
Sir has no knowledge of the assignment.
Okay.
I said he will check and get back to us.
Okay.
Let's wait. He will get back to us.
All right. So yes.
Thank you.
That's all right. So please,